So we want to welcome everyone, wherever you're joining us from. We're so grateful that you chose to come and listen to this message. Maybe you're watching on TV, maybe you're listening on a podcast or whatever else. Do you know what? This message has the potential to not just change your life, but even some that have not yet been born. It's going to have like a ripple effect. So if we respond to this message today, it will impact the future destination and destiny of others. You've got to listen sharply. You've got to listen up. Now we're in this generation, the regeneration series, all about the generations. And I just have to visit this. I wasn't going to do it, but I was just challenged to do it because there's certain things that you sort of shouldn't really talk about in church. Why is that? It's because they can normally cause upset. And this is probably one of the top subjects. So I just need you to get ready, get your heart ready, because this is one of the things you shouldn't really go there too much about is parenting. Because we get very sensitive when people start talking about styles of parenting that could challenge ours, be different to ours. We all get sensitive. And I've been around church for a long time and I've seen it. I've seen sort of someone who seems very gentle and placid when sort of challenged about their child's behavior in kids become a roaring monster. Are you talking about my Johnny? Now, I'm going to pick on Johnny a lot today, and if your name's Johnny, I don't want you to feel I've got an issue with you. It's not like, a bit of a point. So sorry about that, but, I know that God's going to help you get through this. But it's so true, is that when you start talking, and I know that when I start bringing some principles around parenting, there's going to be challenge, a little bit of friction, maybe some offense. Well, I don't agree with that. And look, don't send me the emails, right? Or the anonymous letters, like sometimes I get, don't send them to me. Because what I want to do is I want to present some principles that I believe are biblical. You then need to decide as parents, whether, hey, just have an open mind that will question and say, maybe that is worth considering. So I'm not up here saying, hey, this is the way you should do it, because you'll soon find out I'm a parent that didn't get it right. I didn't get it right all the time. It was like many times made mistakes, and hopefully I'm going to speak out of some of those things. Okay? So this is how you should be a super duper Christian parent. I've heard some people talk like that, and I thought, I don't even come anywhere near you. You must be like, the way you get your kids to read the Bible around the table and take communion and do all these things, and we're only going to watch Bible stories. I'm thinking, wow, something went wrong with me. So guys, just I want this to be real. Because of that, I've got to give some examples. And if it's an example that you think, are you talking about me? Because again, I get people saying, have you been to my home? Look, guys, no one's reported you, but it's amazing how, I'm asking now, Holy Spirit, will you speak to us? Holy Spirit, will you speak into our homes, into our lives, into the way we parent? Pray that we'll be able to lay down what somehow we feel defensive over to say, help us to be secure so that we can really do our best, Lord, for the generation that's coming in Jesus' name. So the other thing I want to mention was, I know straight away if you haven't got children. So first of all, if you're single or you haven't got children, you might be a teenager, you might be a Zeal student, don't switch off. Because you can easily think, oh, well, when I get to that stage, it will be relevant. No. I'll tell you what, if you can grab hold of some of the principles I'm going to share, it will set you up, right, for who you meet and the agreement you make before you decide to marry. You don't want to wait till the point of now I'm pregnant. Let's quickly, where was that bit of teaching? Don't do that. I'm saying that there is something for every one of us. Also, if you are perhaps you've had your children, and this is now looking back, there is still something for you. There's something for you. And then ultimately, everyone else who you're thinking, you didn't mention me, is what I'm going to share about parenting should reflect something about the heart of God to you. So turn it around the other way. And if you can understand the way that God thinks as a father, You'll understand maybe some of the way that you respond to him, because we're all children of God. So please don't miss what God's about to do. So as I said, this is my sort of tribe, the 5 boys. Obviously, when they were younger, they were known locally as the Fight Club. But you never talk about what goes on in the Fight Club. And when people saw us coming, we used to go for a walk in the woods, and when we saw like a happy little family, they seemed to disperse quickly. As if some fear and dread came over people. And we always wondered why no one ever invited us around to their house for tea. We had to make our own picnic and go out into the field. But do you know what? We taught them what it meant to endure. And one of the things we taught all of our boys is never give up. And even from this picture I'm showing you of the 5 boys, Josh, Luke, Jord, Isaac, and Solomon, they're all different and unique. It's one of the first things you've got to realize, that every child that is given to you is unique. You cannot make comparisons. You cannot maybe even use one system for another system. Because I tell you what, when Solomon came and we thought we had it cracked, we had to start all over again. In fact, we often think if he came second, that probably would have been it. Everyone is different, so that's why when I share some principles to you, you can't just think, oh, well, that doesn't really apply to my parenting situation, because every parenting situation is so different, right? You're going to have all different challenges. And when I think back to when our boys were young like this, I was thinking when, in the early days when Josh was little, we didn't have disposable nappies. When I see you mums with disposable, with all the little stuff that sticks little nappy bag that smells nice. Wrap it all up. We had those big terry toweling nappies that were covered half of the baby. You used to wrap them up with a big pin through the front, and then the big thing was these they were like towels. They were like small towels, and once they were used and wet and dirty and everything else, you used to put them in a big bucket in the toilet, as in the bathroom. You used to put them in and used to put them in there, poke them, and there was this solution in there that was it was toxic, and so constantly for probably the first 10 years of my life, this bucket was in the bathroom. No pot puree took it away. I go to some of your houses now, you got the pot puree in the bathroom. When I go there, you got the little candle burning, and there's no sign of nappies at all because you've got your little scented bags. But I'm not bitter. And then when it came to traveling in the car for any journey, can you imagine? We went to Scotland once. It was a 7-hour journey. I only had a van. So I strapped Josh in his buggy in the back with some of those elastic things. Health and safety. And then obviously we didn't have phones that you actually took with you. They were attached to something. So when they kicked off in the back, the Fight Club, it was you pulled over into the lay-by. And you went behind the hedge. Things happened, then you came back. There wasn't any screen to say, let's watch this. So guys, the point is, we'll all have different, things to contend with. And even right now, I'm sure the challenges that you face as parents, there may be advantages, but there'll be disadvantages. And it's not like it was tough in my day. Do you know what I mean? There were things that were easier, things that were tougher. Let's just realize things may be different, but the principles of parenting stay the same. And I think that these principles have stayed the same, even through biblical times where there's instruction given. They stay the same. So let's not get into this way of thinking, maybe, things have moved on now, and we're a bit more of the modern parents. We read all the Christian parenting books. Good for you. Why is your kid still got such issues then? Because sometimes we read all this stuff and we're still not dealing with things. So we're going to look at a few of these, and I thought it would be great to start from 1 Samuel chapter 2. Yeah? Let's get some Bible stuff going. Here we go. This is all about Eli, who was a priest, which would be basically, he's like a bit of a holy man. He's been chosen to sort of prepare the sacrifices and altars. And it starts off here all about his sons. Eli's sons, 1 Samuel 2, verse 12 and 22, they were scoundrels. So putting it bluntly, they weren't nice boys. They were trouble. They were scoundrels. I know sometimes we use it as a bit of a fun word, but this isn't fun. They had no regard for the Lord. They just had no time for the Lord. He wasn't like a priority in their life. Now, Eli, their father, who was very old, heard about everything his sons were doing to all Israel and how they slept with the women who served at the entrance to the tent of the meeting. So the tent of the meeting was basically this place where they would come at the front to prepare, and they were sort of going and they were sleeping with the women that were vulnerable while the sacrifices of worship to the Lord were taking place. This wasn't just like some in the background. This was blatant, full-on disobedience. And it's interesting that it says here, Eli, who was very old. This hasn't just suddenly happened. This has been a pattern for some time. Verse 29, the Lord says, "Why do you scorn my sacrifice and offering that I prescribe for my dwelling? Why do you honor your sons more than me by fattening yourselves on the choice parts of every offering made by my people Israel?" This is the challenge. What was happening was people were bringing the offerings, the sacrifices, like the choice lamb. They were bringing them along. And then the sons were taking their pick of the best. And we all know that the best belongs to God. It's talking about priorities. See, God deserves our best. And there was the priority. And what was happening is they were choosing against all of the instruction. They were saying, hey, we'll have that bit. The best for us, our household. God can have the rest. And Eli knew this. He knew it, and he was the priest. He was like the example. He was the one who was meant to be leading his family. Instead, he had these two sons that were known as scoundrels, but he wasn't going to do anything about it. And here the Lord challenges him. And it goes on into this other verse just in the next chapter, 1 Samuel 3:13. "For I told him," that's Eli, God said, "I would judge his family forever because of the sin he knew about. His sons blasphemed God, and he failed to restrain them. He failed to bring discipline in the early days and therefore set a path and passed a giant onto them that would rob their future generations." And it's all around parenting. The problem didn't happen later on. It was what he did when they were in his house. And this was Eli. This was the one who would even hear from the Lord. You know, he was like, this just shows you can be in church, you can hear from the Lord, you can read your Bible all you want. You can listen to everything, but unless you take action and deal with some things, you're going to find there's trouble. And this is the big sort of challenge that we have as parents. Do you know what? With our children, is we have blind spots. Because we often think, and this is what Eli, he was like, he just had this blind spot. He was so good in so many ways, but when it came to his children, these boys, he was just like, I just go mushy. You know, I just look at them, it's like, I know they're bad, but aren't they lovely? And we so often, we look, and we tend to only see good. And there is good, but we need to deal with the disobedient. And the blind spots, they're a real challenge for every one of us. I know when perhaps you do parents' evening, and I feel for some teachers because there is something about them trying to they've got your child, all week, all month, all year. Then it's parent evening time, and it is amazing to see, when we've been over the years, how much conflict there is when parents are defensive about maybe the attitude of their child because all they can see is, how dare you speak about my child like that? And unless we're willing to respond and be open, we're just going to be exposed to the blind spots. Even now, while I preach this message, there'll be blind spots that will want to just say, oh, that's not me. That's not my Johnny. Right? Johnny's not like that. And we need to watch out, because sometimes, you see, I think Eli's love for his sons, because it's a weird thing, because, if you love, it's like, I love him so much. Yeah, you can love him so much, you ruin them. The challenge that God had with Eli was the fact that he honored his sons more than he honored God. It means basically he put his sons above God and God below them. So when it came to disobedience or a standard, it was like, I'm going to really side with my sons rather than side with God, because if I side with God, it might bring me into conflict with my sons, and then I might end up having a disagreement with them, and I couldn't bear that. So let's just ignore it, shall we? In fact, how many parents are ignoring things right now? Because there's a cost when parents choose to ignore what they should confront. This is what the story is, right? Now, if you're a child, a teenager, at the minute you might be thinking, oh man, he's giving me a bad time here, because I'm setting you up. Stay with me. This is like good. This is good. Because one of the things I've learned is I will pay a great cost if I choose to ignore what I should be confronting. And Eli paid a great cost for the generations to come because he chose to ignore what he should have confronted. And I can see, and it's the fact that I will choose to honor. And I've been around like friends and people who are like incredible potential who just have not been willing to confront their child. I've been in meetings with them because of the disobedience of their children, where I've had to go with them to support them to someone else because of what they did to a girl. And it's a terrible place. And then the father comes back and just said, well, I think it's the way teenagers are today. I'm thinking, you won't confront. And then it happens again, and then they end up sort of like disappearing because the father says, I'm not really willing to confront that. I'll confront everything else in my life, but this is my soft spot. This is my blind spot. This is the area that please don't ask me to go there, God, because I just find it so hard when it comes to bringing that confrontation that needs to happen. So guys, I don't want you to pay the price. See, we think it's a short-term win, but it's a long-term loss. So I want to just refer to different types of children. The first one is called Johnny Lovely. And it's a little bit about what I've been talking about. It's like, Johnny Lovely, all his parents see is, oh, he's lovely, isn't he? And even when he does scoundrel things, it's like, oh, but he's a lovely scoundrel. And when you go to their house, he's like a wild animal. And yet what they're doing is, the parents are like, they're going, oh, isn't he lovely? He's so adventurous. Johnny Lovely. And Johnny Lovely, the trouble with Johnny Lovely is, even when he does things bad, he's corrected through, oh, come on, don't do that, lovely. What does that say, right? What does it say to him? Confusion. See, we get mixed up with affirmation, where we bring correction with, on the end of it, you're lovely, aren't you? And we do. It's because we just want to throw praise. And maybe it's because we didn't have that. I don't know. Maybe it's because somehow we just want to reassure and reaffirm and he is lovely. And we see this one side of Johnny Lovely, and we still bring correction. We bring stuff, but with it, there is almost like this default to, he's lovely. But when he's bringing disrespect or disharmony, or saying things he should not say, and we affirm it through, don't do that, my lovely. You're thinking, let me take him out. Let me have a word, because he shouldn't be getting away with that, because this isn't just about this moment. It's not going to suddenly, as he grows up, he's suddenly going to get like a bit of a glimpse of, maybe I shouldn't behave just however I want. Because Johnny Lovely struggles with self-control. He gets affirmation and isn't quite sure where the line is. He knows that there are things that are sort of wrong, but there is affirmation that comes even when those things are wrong, and he crosses the boundary. And it's a challenge, because we want to bring affirmation, and yet there needs to be a firm, clear direction when there is disobedience and disrespect. And I'm saying, guys, that you have to confront it. In the early days, we had to confront it. Let me tell you this. If you have a character, because all our kids are different, if you have a character that is very strong, if Johnny is a strong character, and God's blessed you with a strong-willed, characterful child, you're going to have to be more clear, more determined to bring this level of discipline. It's true. And I just know with our boys, is like when we started off, Josh, he was one of the toughest little kids. We went to battle. It was like a war and he was only about 1. And then it went to his 2s. And it was like it really was. He was trying to break me, and I was trying to break him. Because of his will and the character and the determination. And yet George was a total different character, who I shouted him once and his little bottom lip quivered. And I hardly ever had, do you know what I mean? There's different ways, but you've got to confront. And maybe there needed more reassurance with George, see? But with Josh, there needed this strength and this, I remember disciplining him once, and he said, it didn't hurt. Right. Come back into my room. This defiance, but it's channeling it, you see. It's channeling, because if we don't teach our kids to honor, see, it's talking about honor, and if we don't teach them to honor authority, they're going to have issues all of their life. They're going to have issues with self-control. They're going to have issues with, I get affirmation for this. I'm not quite sure whether I've gone over the line here. And I think sometimes we worry too much today that if we're too harsh, if we're too strong, if we sort of come in, that somehow it might damage them. Now, that I'm not talking about abuse and all those things. And this is the problem. Some of us, you see, we leave giants because what we do is we end up sort of coming from a background where we were abused. And authority was abused over us. And so what we now want to do is, we don't like that confrontation, because it reminds us and takes us back to all that horrible stuff, which was wrong. I'm not talking about that, it was wrong. But what we do is we swing the other way, where we want to bring this affirmation that is we've got to bring discipline in, and then afterwards we're feeling guilty. I've been there. You've disciplined, then you're there thinking, I feel so bad. Why can't he just do as he's told? Going to have to deal with it. But I knew that if I didn't confront it at this age, suddenly, you see, little Johnny Lovely is going to become a terrorist. I don't mean a literal terrorist. I mean he's going to terrorize people. He's going to terrorize people, right? He's maybe going to disrespect women because he couldn't respect his mother. And you allowed things to be said, a behavior towards yourself, or as a father towards your wife, that what it does is starts to, he's lovely. Let's think of the positive rather than negative. And I think Eli had something around this, and it's so powerful, guys, because we'll leave a giant, you see, for our child, because they grow up. There's going to be a confusion around what real good discipline is. And I've got to say, Scripture says, that if we actually spare the rod, it says, but it's the rod of discipline. So it's not like a great big stick. It's basically, if we spare and we avoid committing to discipline, you will spoil your child. Spoil means damage, so they don't fulfill their potential. And I've got to say, I speak to far more people who were spoiled, and even today, the challenges they have today are because they were spoiled, and they didn't have discipline, which didn't create self-control, which didn't develop honor and respect. and they got all these sorts of things going on, and they're a parent themselves, trying to grow up Johnny the second. And what we do is, often when we've had a very hard, tough background, we'll swing the other way to being soft and loving because we just don't want to be there. And some of us who have been very soft, sometimes we can swing even the other way. But there's a balance. This is about the balance, you see. So this is Johnny Lovely. Hope you got the idea. Yeah? Johnny Lovely. Be clear. Be firm. He doesn't need a discussion about what he's done wrong. He needs discipline. Because sometimes we're sitting down trying to explain to a 3-year-old, right, we're giving them like a whole paragraph of a book we've read or something about, do you know why that wasn't good? To hit your brother. Sometimes they just need discipline. I'm not saying don't explain, and I think it's when things happen, there's no explanation. That can also be damaging. But I think today we're in a culture where let's just sit down and explain everything. No, you need to have a culture of discipline where there are standards that actually they're known without even talking about. And yet if you're trying to explain something all the time, you're not communicating clearly where the line is. And last thing on this, I've just got to say this, is you also need the agreement of parents. There's no good in saying, wait till your dad comes home. Because I've seen or if it's like the dad saying, right, you just wait, mum's going to sort you out. That's so imbalanced. And what will happen is that it brings confusion again. And you've got to be both in agreement, because I've seen sometimes one parent really striving to bring discipline and a standard, and the other one just undoes it by their response. And you go around in circles, and you're wondering, there's frustration because you're not getting anywhere. Because kids, they might look 3, but they've already got it sussed. They know who's the weaker one. They know if there's a disagreement, and there's power in agreement, disagreement will undermine you. I think, in fact, many of us avoid confrontation because we haven't confronted the things that are actually within ourselves. So if you've got an anger issue, you can sometimes avoid confronting anger. If you picked up certain things, if you are undisciplined as a parent in your lifestyle, it's going to be very hard for you to confront a lack of discipline in your child. So let's move on to, not this one, Johnny Don't. Because I just want to bring the balance to this. Johnny Don't is the other extreme. He ends up going to primary school, and they call out the register, they call out their names, and he's waiting for his name to be called Johnny Don't. Because he thinks it's his name. Because that's all he's ever heard growing up. Johnny Don't. It's been correction. It's been discipline. Discipline without affirmation. See, there's a place for discipline, but there's a place for affirmation. And there is this thing about our kids. See, if you're constantly correcting your children because you somehow want them to be perfect, because it looks good on you, you're going to break them. They're going to end up insecure. They're going to end up struggling to find confidence. And if you actually hold back approval and affirmation, they're going to go and look for it somewhere else. Through a girl or boy or friends or addictions. It's huge. So you can just see how big this is. If you go the other way, and it's Johnny Don't. And I know so many people, okay? So many people. Some of these are grown men. I want to just use the men as an example. Grown men, and I'm talking about in their 20s, even 30s, who they have like quite a fractured relationship with their father. They got a good dad. They got a dad at home. Mum and dad stay together. It wasn't from a broken family. In fact, they might even go to church and, they're sort of, do their best. And, they've had a good, privileged upbringing. But when dad comes home, he's emotionally detached. And he doesn't actually really connect with his son. Because he sees that the way I love my son is providing. And in fact, we've done very nice, and you've got a very nice home. that my job as a father is to provide. And yet and I've time and time, men have come to me and they say, why won't my dad just turn around and say, well done to me? Why won't my dad even today just put his arm around me and say, do you know what? I love you, son. And this is Christian men as well. I'm speaking to any Christian man right now. If you can't think of the last time you did that, if it's not sort of just recently, you need to confront something in yourself. Because that's something, again, that the issue you've got is you're not confronting something that was lacking in you. And you need to overcome it so that you can be emotionally connected with your children. So that you can reach out. Because they need, in a way, you can give them all they want. And in certain parts of the Western world, we have kids growing up with everything they want. By the age of 14, they've had it all. And do you know what happens then? They then go into addictions because they're dissatisfied. Giving our kids everything is not true. It's not good parenting. Good intention is not good parenting. You may have very, very little, but you can give the richest gifts to your kids through the way that you love and connect and affirm. Even Jesus, when he's getting baptized and he comes before, this baptism, and suddenly like this is the beginning of his ministry, before he's done anything, we know that God speaks from heaven as the Father and he says, behold, this is my son, my beloved son. This is his announcement, day one. This is my beloved son who I'm well pleased with. See, affirmation, I'm affirming him. See, there's this love and this power and saying, no, this is what it's born out of. And yet Jesus talks about a father that will discipline, and our Father loves to discipline those he loves. If he didn't, it says he hates them. See, that's the opposite. If we don't bring discipline, it's like we hate them because we're setting them up for a fail. But if we're firm, and it's harder to be firm because you can't let things go. You've got to confront and you've got to work it out. And there's pain and there's heartache. And it's like, are they going to think I'm the worst dad ever? But if you don't deal with those things, you'll leave a trail of destruction. It's very difficult. So just the last one. Oh, not that one. Johnny Guilty. Now, Johnny Guilty, I've thrown this in there because Johnny Guilty, he comes from a background where there's been maybe loss. And what it really means is, like I knew parents at one time who went through devastating loss of their one son. So their second son, they poured so much upon that son because of the loss. And I don't know what it's like to lose a child, a grown child. And from that, they spoiled him to death and could not bring discipline to his life, which eventually had such an impact on him. Why? Because they wanted to overcompensate for the loss they experienced in their life. Loss can do it. If you've adopted someone, you can do the same. You think they've been through so much, they've been through this, and so what you do is you sort of want to let's let that go. Let's be more, and we've got to make sure because they've been through all this rejection, so we don't want to rejection, do it. And do you know what? We step back. It's the worst thing you can do. They want to be treated normal, right? There is something of normal, of saying you're awesome, and there's security here, not insecurity. And see, from it, there is this overcompensating for the journey that's been. What about divorce? Single parents I'm speaking to right now, I know it must be so challenging because you can feel guilty for a marriage that's broken down, and so then you can overcompensate for the children that you have, and you make decisions based on your guilt and where you've come from, and what you do is you create issues because you're almost like afraid of going there. Because you got to get free. You got to get free and realize that overcompensating for this that's gone on in my life and that's gone on. Do you know what? God makes all things new. And even if you're a single parent right now, right, you could feel through this message almost like overwhelmed because you're by yourself. But at least you don't have to, find agreement. You can just right, this is the way as a parent in my house, I'm going to raise my child. Do you know what? It's not too late. It's not too late. You're right. You've got to just take security and confidence, but with it, you're going to have to confront. And if you've been through pain and you've been through all that difficulty through divorce and separation, you feel exhausted. So it's very hard then to confront the issues that have come from that because It's easy just to ignore. But it will come back. And so you just got to watch out for this. You know, even if like kids are in where two people have been divorced, get married, and you've got two sets of children from two different families, again, don't overcompensate. You've got to agree together. You've got to agree together. It's the best thing you can do for them. So last, I mentioned the cuckoo. We're not far away, we're at the end. Here we go. Here's the cuckoo, right? The cuckoo, you think, what the heck is the cuckoo? Do you remember we had the, we've been called to like plant the trees that those trees that might be planted for generations to come. That's what this is all about, the way we raise our kids. We're doing something, investing for maybe something that we don't always see the end of. But in the woods, there are giants. But in the giants, there are cuckoos. And the cuckoo is a bird that we, I think, have in Europe. Certainly in the UK, we have the cuckoo bird, which is an interesting bird because this one bird, he makes a nice noise, cuckoo, cuckoo, and he comes out of a little clock sometimes. But this cuckoo, he is a scoundrel because the cuckoo doesn't make his own nest, or she doesn't make her own nest. She looks for other birds who have made a nest, watches them from a distance and waits for an opportunity when the mother is away and she's laid her eggs to actually go, and she sits on the nest and she lays her egg. And then she lets the other mother take care of the eggs while she's out flitting around, making out, because she's got no responsibility as a parent. And then this little bird is there taking care of the eggs. And then after a little while, the cuckoo normally hatches before the others. And this is what happens. This is a picture of a cuckoo in the nest who is actually shouldering out the egg of the real mother. There is something in this bird that understands if there's other birds in this nest, first, she's going to see I'm different. Next, I won't get as much food. And so there's instinct in this bird that will actually get in there and will push every egg out. So finally, when the mother comes back, there's just this one chick left that she pours everything into. And what you're left with, the cuckoo is the stripy big beast. The mother is the small thing, feeding this gannet, feeding this uncontainable, and she spends her time trying to satisfy this chick that actually is not a chick. Guys, that is why we need to realize every parent, if you don't watch and if you ignore what comes into your home, if you ignore what comes into your home and you put up with whatever comes in, if you put up with standards and things that will come in, and oh, this is just the way that our world is today, do you know what? You're allowing a great cuckoo to come into your house. And what it will do is it will rob you of your true inheritance. It will rob you. It will come in, and later on, you will be consumed. You'll be consumed in your life even after that child has left your home. You'll be consumed with their problems because you chose not to lead them. The enemy wants to rob your seed. And I can't think, when I just saw the cuckoo, I just thought, I can't think, it's just like the enemy, waiting for an opportunity to come in. Removing. So you can't really compare what your child should be. You need a great vision for your children. You need a great vision for the child that are yet to come. You need a great vision. It needs to be firm. Otherwise, you're going to end up in a place that means you're going to have to feed it and be consumed by it. So our children need leadership, not a democracy. When my children, those 5 boys, were in our home, we didn't sit around the table and all say, hey, what do we want for lunch today, family? We had food, they ate it. Or if they didn't, they went without. We did things together, but we didn't say, hey, where do you fancy going this year on holiday? We didn't have those conversations. Might have asked them, but we made the decision. We didn't say, hey, now you're like 9 or 10 years old and I can just see you're a bit bored with church. Do you want to stay at home? Well, we go to church because we don't want to force you, because we were forced, and my biggest fear is to force you because then it might put you off God forever. So why don't you stay at home as a teenager, watch things while we're at church that are probably just going to make you further away from God, and then hopefully it's all going to work out in the wash, because what we choose as parents to avoid, what we want, the difficult conversation, right? And we've been there, the sulky teenager in the car who doesn't want to go to church and sits on the front row trying to distract you while you're preaching. I'm your son, and I'm not happy that I'm here. Guys, we push through with every one of them. And I want to put this shout because, do you know what? Your children's futures depend on this. And some of us have given up. And I'm calling out to you, maybe it's going to, if you've been doing this for a while, it's going to be hard for you to go back and change your mind. But you need to go back and say, look, sit them down and say, do you know what? Mum and Dad were wrong. Do you know what? We got this wrong. We want you to forgive us. This is actually a priority in our house, that we will serve the Lord. And do you know what? Even if we're not going to force you to worship, we're not going to force you to, but we're going to go and worship together until you're 18 at least. We're going to do this together. And while we do that together, do you know what? We're going to believe the Lord's going to speak to you. He's going to show himself to you. Where do you think there's more chance of the Lord changing this kid's life? In church or at home on some computer? Hanging out with some friends that aren't going to do them any good. Do you think suddenly they're going to go, oh, well, my parents didn't force me, and now I'm just like feeling so oozy about Jesus? It doesn't happen, guys. We need to wake up, and this is the story of the cuckoo. So I want to encourage you. It's really tough and it's really hard, but don't you give up, because the enemy wants to rob your chicks. And we need to be firm and confident. Don't let fear come in that somehow we're going to push them away forever. God will come through. God is faithful. God is faithful. Let me finish with this last quote here. If you want your children to live their best life, you must lead them and not just appease them. It all comes down to leadership, church. Right? Leadership as parents, single parent, parents together, right? I'm saying it comes down to your leadership. Your leadership. Stop avoiding dealing with some things in your life because you can't confront some things in your child's life. They're going to pay a great price for it. But I want to speak hope and life today. If you have got a child that is difficult, I want to say God knew what he was doing when he gave them to you. He knew it, you know. All of my boys, God saw it fit that he would entrust them to us. And it's the greatest stewardship gift you'll ever be given. Greater than the millions on this earth. Greater than anything you could have is your child, right? It's the greatest thing that you will answer for. And so steward, raise up champions. Raise up champions in the house of God. That's what we're talking about in this regeneration series. Is there's champions all around us, but we've got to get this right, church. We want to raise Johnny Champion. That's who we want. Johnny Champion. That's who we're looking for. You've got to get a vision for him, even in the most difficult time of rebellion and difficulty. Get a vision and keep speaking vision. Keep speaking vision, but you still got to discipline. And we're going to see, I just believe we're going to see the next generation that will raise the next generation. You're going to see generations raised with this balance. And it says, you know, if you honor me first, honor me first, God says, honor me, put me first in your family. Call out for wisdom. So I encourage you, if there have been mistakes that have been made up till now, if there have been, I know you've got regrets, it's really important that today you put an end to it. It's okay, that's behind, but I'm going to take steps. Go to war on what you need to go to war on. Right? Start saying, okay, we're going to agree about this. We're going to have our steps and we're going to fight this through. Right? And there's a time to do that. You got to be full of energy and ready to go for it. But you got to go and you got to set this in place and it will pay so much treasure back to you. So be encouraged, parents. You're amazing. Parenting is one of the bravest, boldest things you'll ever have to do. And we're cheering you on here at Freedom Church. Every one of you around the world, we're cheering you on. We believe so much that this is how you raise the most incredible people. I don't know anyone who feel condemned today. I want you to be encouraged and inspired because I believe that you want the best for your children. So it's not to appease them, but to lead them. God bless you in Jesus' name.